Hello everyone and welcome back. Silhouette Sunset is an extremely visually striking level. Let's not beat around the bush, it is downright gorgeous. I can't imagine it was easy getting the stage to look like this, and the sheer technical skill it takes just messing with the lighting alone to get a level that looks like this cannot be understated. In terms of raw skill required, this is a masterpiece of the Doom engine. However, Sunset levels work well in Retro's Donkey Kong games because it's only raw platforming you're doing. Sure, you might be surprised by the occasional enemy here and there, but enemies are little more than stage hazards in the modern Donkey Kong series. Most crucially, however, those levels were always side-scrolling 2D. When you're dealing with a 3D world that you're expected to navigate around and do both combat and platforming in, the intended reference starts breaking down. While the level itself looks stunning, it just isn't very much fun to play through. It feels like you're forced to move slower because you can't see where you're going quite as well. And not helping matters is the fact that those bulb enemies we've been seeing for the entire game blend almost perfectly into the tufts of grass scattered around the field. So if you're moving quickly through the level, you'll get hit by a bunch of attacks from enemies you can't see very well. Maybe it's also just me, but this level feels like it takes forever to get through. Not in terms of move speed, but just how large it is. This is what I would call the first truly large level. Each of the 3 sections feels like they're too long by some unquantifiable distance. Something that I haven't even mentioned yet, but something that you may have seen if you have sharp eyes, is that there are several new enemies introduced here. We've already seen the first one, a Pokey. Those stacked, ambulatory cacti enemies that are a staple of Mario games. In addition to them, there's also Revenants and Mancubi. And thankfully, mercifully, the hack's author changed Revenants, so there's no mistaking when they fire homing shots. No longer will we have to look at the rocket to see if there's a smoke trail or not. There is now an unmistakable and unmissable auditory cue, and it's often your first clue that there is a Revenant nearby. We'll get a much better look at Pokies in the next video, when we can actually see them without the shadowy overlay. Like I said, the sound of a Revenant firing a homing missile is unmissable and unmistakable. It's one of the best changes this hack makes, and takes away a lot of the mystique of fighting these otherwise terrible enemies. So why do I dislike this level so much? A lot of it is that it's nearly impossible to see anything, and I firmly believe that a player's vision shouldn't be obscured unless there's an extremely good reason. I'm also down on it because the entire second section, which we have yet to even reach, is pretty much water cave all over again. Let me tell you, swimming and being visually obscured while doing so is a match made in hell. I also hear some of you asking why I don't just use cheats to give myself the light amp. I already tried that the first time I played. Doing so actually prevents you from seeing anything at all besides a shadowy black plane. The end of this first section is just up on the top of the hill behind us, so it's not very far away. And so that leads me to another point. Something you may have noticed is that aside from 1 or 2 token jumps, this level has been, and this is probably more damning than anything else, boring. It doesn't have the challenging platforming from Kilescent Castle or The Land with No Name. It feels like the concept for the level was realized first and then something was built around that. To me at least, this is a level that relies purely on its visuals to awe the player. Don't get me wrong, there is absolutely nothing wrong with having a good looking level. Visual presentation counts for a lot at the end of the day. I guess I'm just trying to communicate that I think the level could be so much more than just a pretty skybox and some dark terrain. The part of the level that I like the least is also coming up here in a minute, and I think you'll immediately understand why when I say I can't find anything redeeming to say about it. This second section takes everything that I think was wrong with the first, and then cranks that dial up to 11. I also lied earlier. There was one more new enemy type in the level. These bloopers don't have a lot of health, but they dodge around like the fire ghosts, and have shockingly accurate ink shots. And when you get hit, I think you're starting to understand just why I dislike this level so much. This second section in particular is just a nest of bad decisions compounding on top of each other. Even more luckily for us, bloopers are going to become a mainstay enemy from here on out, so pretty much every underwater section from here until the end of the hack will feature at least one of the little bastards in addition to the tentacles and fish. I believe it's also this level that starts featuring normal enemies underwater, making the combat even more treacherous than it was before. But on the upside, it at least cures the same enemies over and over problem I had with earlier underwater sections of the hack. Bloopers, in my opinion, are completely irredeemable enemies. It all boils back down to something I mentioned a couple of minutes ago: obscuring the player's vision. When you're fighting multiple bloopers, it's not uncommon to have that ink on the camera effect applied for a rather long time, because getting hit just once makes it even more likely you're going to get hit again. It turns into a very vicious cycle. Okay, credit where credit's due. That Sniffit getting into a fight with a fish was pretty damn funny. Also, we are going to have to come back to this room in a few minutes. The second big coin is extremely well hidden in here, behind some bricks that have yet to be introduced properly. I even did a test run through the level before recording and nearly forgot to come back for the coin while recording. If I were forced to come up with a positive about this claustrophobia-inducing underwater section, it would be the combat. Allowing us to fight the normal stage enemies down here in addition to the usual fare improves things so much. Regular enemies behave very differently underwater, and the threat priority changes entirely. It's such a huge shakeup to the normal Doom gameplay loop, and I think it's ultimately a change for the positive. To emphasize what I just said, look right here. Between a Cacodemon and a blooper, the latter is the much more dangerous enemy. Their shots barely deal any damage, but obscuring your vision around the enemy with the wider damage variance actually makes them the more dangerous of the two foes. Above ground, kill the Cacodemon every time because it can fly and harass you even in otherwise safe spots. Enemy threat calculus is something that every Doom player does, but nobody really seems cognizant of the fact that they're doing it until they actually stop and consider what it is that they're doing. Having to quickly reassess threats while under different movement conditions makes enemies you otherwise can dance around that much more dangerous, and it's carefully designed moments like that that really make this hack great. So look at that, I guess I did find something to commend in this underwater section. I'm not going to go so far as to say that the level is redeemed because you can fight a Mancubus while floating or whatever, but it at least shakes things up in a way that keeps the combat in an otherwise dull section nice and fresh. This switch opens up the exit to the third section, but we still have yet to find the big coin, so we'll be going to do that before we head towards the now unlocked door, or teleporter I guess. I'm not going to try to defend this. If you play this hack in the order that we are here, this is the absolute first time you will see these destructible blocks. You can blow them up with pretty much any weapon, but it's a bit of a mean trick to play because of the aforementioned shadows. Your only clue that these blocks are here is that from a certain angle you can see light shining through them. The X is just through the next room. Ultimately, this underwater part was very short, but like everything else in this level, it feels like you're forced to crawl for every inch of progress. Thankfully, the last bit of the level is back up top, once again in the glow of the admittedly very pretty orange and red sunset. Whoops, that's pretty embarrassing, running out of shotgun shells like that. It just shows how many shots I've been missing on these stupid squids. Ah, blessed fresh air. It's amazing how just the color in the background of something can influence your mood. The blue background of the underwater section lent itself to a pretty somber mood, helped by the Donkey Kong Country underwater music. Up here the music is just as fitting. Life in the Mines syncs oddly well to the mood of a desert sunset. Maybe it's just because I'm thankful that it's not subaquatic, but this last section seems to buck the trend set by the first. Looking in the distance, you can already see platforms moving up and down. You know, actual platforming obstacles. The land is broken up and varied and not just a glorified switchback, and I can personally guarantee that the encounters are a lot more interesting, including one where I had to cut out a good 5 minutes of failure thanks to the weird intricacies of the approach. I wouldn't say it's good, but it's much improved over the first part. A Revenant sniper is just mean if you don't know he's there, but it's a good kind of mean. I know I'm saying a lot now, but it's breaking up the boring sameness with actual challenge. It's actually making the most of this level instead of acting like a proof of concept. I think this is perhaps the best way to handle the level, by taking advantage of its silhouetted nature to have a lot of ambushes. It naturally leads to a lot of frustration, but an observant player can also attack the ambushing enemies from a distance, to disarm the trap so to speak, and allow them to engage the enemies on their own terms. I think my ideal version of this level would make it first shorter. It would also cut out the underwater section to keep the overall theme coherent. If the underwater section absolutely had to stay, I'm actually not sure there's much about it I would change. Finally, the level would have more ambushes like that Revenant sniper or the Kekodima from behind. By keeping the player on their toes the whole time, it would naturally make the most out of the level's aesthetics. You wouldn't necessarily need challenging platforming when around every corner there's something sniping at you. And for all I know, this may actually be the case on the higher difficulties. I admittedly haven't played on the equivalent of Ultraviolence, which traditionally has always had more enemies and in nastier arrangements. This section right here is the one I mentioned earlier. Something about the Revenant across the gap, with the Hell Knight coming up the ramp from the side, was a particularly potent combination. Getting past the both of them relatively unscathed was actually a pretty fun challenge. In case anyone was wondering why I don't like Revenants, this is why. I really dislike playing chicken with homing missiles. Whoops, nearly forgot the secret coin. This is another sneaky one. My first time playing, I actually got accidentally blasted off the ledge and down on top of it. So my life was saved by pure dumb luck. The worst of the level is long since past, so it's all downhill from here. In fact, the exit isn't too far away. Once we turn the corner where that Revenant was, we'll actually be able to see it in the distance. A setup like this one is, again, making the best out of the level. You're really not in a lot of danger by being hit by the spiky ball guys, but their attacks serve as a pretty effective area denial. And if you aren't paying close attention, you will be hit by the flower enemies. This actually makes the spiky ball guys a pretty effective distraction. That was so satisfying. I love the silly physics applied to the pokies when they get hit by something. Alright, the level's going to be coming to close here in a minute, so I want to thank you all for watching. The normal exit from Arid Abode actually opened up 2 different levels at the same time. Clearing either will allow us to advance to the Fortress of the Desert. We're going to be doing both of the next levels first, starting with the Lilac Landscape. See y'all then!